Hey guys, I'm going to tell you a story that goes back 20 years. And this is a story about what happened to me during the Cedar Fire. Now, I've talked about this a number of times, and I may have posted sort of oblique comments about it on the anniversaries of the Cedar Fire, but I've never really said it on camera what happened during the fire. So I had already left full-time EMS at that point. I was working for a state senator with the district office in Carlsbad. And so I was working full-time for the Senate, and I was still picking up shifts on the ambulance when the Cedar Fire hit. I was at home in Oceanside with Amanda. We were dating at the time. And I got a page about this big fire that was happening. I walked outside and I looked up. I saw a huge header of smoke. And I told the man, I said, I have to go in. I have to go work on this. And so I went down to American Medical Response main headquarters and was teamed up with a partner who I'd never met before. And I don't even know his name. He's just a big country red-haired dude, right? And we got dispatched out originally to the lakeside area. And because the fire hadn't really grown to the point of where it would end up being, and the firefighters from Lakeside were out in the eastern areas fighting fires, and we were running 911 calls essentially in the Lakeside area. And so we ran like a dog bite and some other stuff while we were out there. And then we get the page to go out to Alpine to help with evacuations. And we were largely focused on people who were elderly, or who were disabled and whatnot and were not able to get out of their houses. And so we were heading east on the 8 freeway in the ambulance. My partner was driving, and we got up to about where El Cajon is, and they were blocking off the freeway. And so the CHP officer was literally blocked across the freeway, and everybody was getting off the road. I feel like it was out at whatever the road is that used to lead to Scripps East, the old Scripps hospital out there. And we pull up to this California Highway Patrol officer in the road, and he said, "You guys can't go past." And we said, "Well, we got dispatched to go up to Alpine to work on rescues." And he goes, "Okay, it's getting pretty hairy up there. You're going to be the last unit that gets up, right?" And so we said, "Okay, we're going to go." And so we're driving all out east on the 8 freeway, heading up the grade towards Alpine. And he was not joking, man. It got real hairy up there. And so it was actually to the point of where the fire was literally like going up on both sides of the freeway and was creating like a tunnel of fire that we were driving through. So, and my partner and I didn't even know this guy, we're like, "Oh my God, like, look at this," right? Like, we was like looking around like, "Dude, we're in a huge tunnel of fire." And then there was like all these, it was very sad, but there was a lot of animals that had been burned, and they were all huddled on the freeway, and they were trying to escape from the fire. So there was like a deer and rabbits and raccoons and all kinds of stuff on the freeway. And being an animal lover, I'm like, "Oh, we should help these." We couldn't help them. We had to keep going. And so we're driving up through this tunnel of flames, and my partner had a cell phone. I don't even think I had a cell phone at the time. And he said, "I'm going to call my wife." Because we were obviously going into something pretty gnarly, right? And so he calls his wife. He's like, "Hey, just want to let you know I love you. I'm working. I'm going into Alpine. There's a lot of stuff going on down here." He hands me the phone. I call Amanda, and Amanda doesn't pick up. So I leave a message for her, and I'm like, it sounds so bad now. I was like, "Hey, I'm going into like the flames." Like, "Oh my God, look at that!" Like, I'm like commentary on this cell phone call, leaving this message. I was like, "Well, anyways, I love you, but I'm going in the flames. Okay, see ya, bye." I hung up. It's like the worst phone call ever, and she yelled at me about that phone call later. So we go up to Alpine. Then we get to Alpine, and we get dispatched to an apartment complex where this elderly lady was disabled. She was unable to move. And we went into her place, and literally the fire was like taking these buildings. And so we went in and we just turned her into a burrito. We just wrapped her up in a blanket and carried her out to the ambulance and put her on the gurney, put her in the back. And I was kind of trying to get out of downtown Alpine. And it was like a scene out of like a disaster movie where a tsunami's coming, or like a meteor is about to strike. Everyone's in their cars, stuff packed on top, and I'm trying to go against traffic in an ambulance. And I get back out onto the bridge that crosses the 8 freeway from downtown um, Alpine. I can't remember what the name of the bridge is. And I stop on the bridge, and I'm driving at this point, and I look out the side to the west, and the freeway was on fire. Like the road itself was on fire. And I'm looking at him like, holy crap, that's something you don't see every day. Like the freeway's on fire. And so I get out, and there's this firefighter there, and he's like an East County volunteer kind of firefighter, right? And he's he's in this brush unit, fire engine up on the bridge. And I walk up to him, and I'm like, hey, dude, what's up? Like, what's the dealio? Because we're supposed to take this lady to the Qualcomm Stadium evacuation site. He's like, man, you can't go west. The freeway's on fire. And I'm like, yeah, like, who's incident command out here? And he goes, I don't know. You want to be? I'm like, no, I don't want to be incident command out here. So what am I supposed to do? He goes, I don't know. Figure it out. And so I drove across the bridge, and I stopped at this gas station that was over there. And these really nice people that worked at the gas station were giving us jugs of water and stuff like that. And we took these jugs of water. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I'm looking up on the hill where there's these houses. They're relatively newer houses. And I was watching the flames jump from house to house. And it was literally surrounding us. And I said, we need to get the hell out of here. And I said to my partner, I opened the back with my partner was in there with the patient. I said, hey, dude, where can we go out here? And we were talking about it. I said, wait a minute, there's a casino east of here. And it's sort of on like the other side of a rock mountain. I think it's Barona or something. I can't remember what it's called out there. And I said, let's just go out there. We'll set that up because we're not going to drive all the way to El Centro, right? And what am I going to do? Go to Boulevard or something or Campo? No, not going out there. So I was driving through the town to go this sort of back way. And I remember I pulled up to this line of cars. I was kind of bypassing them in the ambulance. And I look over and I see Aaron Friday, who's an EMT that I used to work with at AMR. And he's in there with his family. And I said, hey, go to the casino. I'm going to set up an evacuation center there. So we drive out to the casino. And we get out there. And it's a large complex. And we get out to this casino. And I just literally drove up to the roundabout in the front. And I walked in and into the security office. I said, hey, I'm Aaron. I work on the ambulance. We're doing evacuations. There's no way to get west. The freeway's on fire, which is a weird thing to say. I need a space to do an evacuation center out here. And they just opened a bingo parlor or something like that. And they're like, yeah, sure, you could have it. And it was like so easy. And so we went in there, we took it over, and I started radioing people. And our radio sucked back in the day. And I was like, hey, I got on a landline too. And I said, hey, send people east. And the casino was awesome, man. They brought out like cots and food and blankets and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, all these cars started showing up at the casino. And we ended up having to set up like a landing zone to fly out like burn patients. We had burn patients arriving there. And we were there, and we're sort of living the dream, right? It's like, if you've ever worked in EMS, working fire camp is really pretty cool because you just kind of go and you set up and you take care of the firefighters and you do stuff like, it's kind of like that, but we were working at this evacuation center, and we were there for a number of hours, and we're just working on stuff back and forth, landing helicopters, flying burn patients out. And it was starting to get kind of dark, and I was happy. I'm like, dude, I'll stay here for days. This is great. Like, I'll stay at the evacuation center because there's no fire there to burn your skin off, right? And so all of a sudden, I get a page, and the page says, go back up to Alpine to hold cover, which means go sit on a street corner in Alpine. And I looked at my partner. I said, did you call dispatch? And he's like, yeah. I told him we wanted to get back into it. I'm like, bro, we're living the dream. What are you, a newbie? Like we're living the dream here. We got food. We got cots. We could be here for days, man. But no, they send us back up into Alpine. So we went into Alpine, and like the power was out in downtown Alpine. No place was open. And ironically, we hadn't eaten because we were so busy working at that thing that even though there's a ton of food there at the casino, we hadn't eaten. And so we actually went to the fire station, and we got into the fire station in Alpine, and we stole their pudding cups. So we took these pudding cups and we're like eating pudding and stuff in the ambulance, and we get a call. And this is where things start to get really hairy. So we get a call in Harbison Canyon, and it was for a youth who was disabled and was bedbound. And so we're driving west on Harbison Canyon Road, and my partner's driving. I'm in the passenger side, so I'm patient man, right, in this situation. And we're driving down, and in hindsight, I'm noticing things, right? So we're driving past these firefighters who are fighting fires on the side of the road, and they're all looking at us. And they had this unmistakable look of, where the hell are those guys going, right? And but I didn't notice it at the time, but now in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly the look that they were giving us. And we're driving down Harbison Canyon Road, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. Fire, fire, fire everywhere, right? And fire on both sides of the road. And we come around this bend, and this ball of embers, and I swear it was like the size of a basketball, fell on the hood of the ambulance, and it exploded like all over the place. And we were like why, like, come to a stop. And we came to a stop on top of down power lines. And so we're looking around, and it was like da, 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 on the power lines. And we're looking around, and we're like, oh my God, like, we're on power lines. Like, and you're instantly thinking in your head, like, okay, rubber tires, is that going to insulate me from the power lines? Like, we're going to get shocked by this thing. We need to get off this stuff. What are we doing here? And so we had a brief conversation. I'm like, just keep driving. Let's just keep driving and try and get through this. So we driving through this, and off these down power lines, and we're kind of slowly creeping down the road, and we come upon this spot where there's a car, and it was like a green Yukon, and it was off the side of the road, and the door was like ajar, and we're looking at it like, is there somebody in there? Like, what are we gonna do? And I had thought for a second, like, oh, I'm gonna get out and go check this. And I said, before I get out, let me just test this. And I touched the window just to see how hot it was, and it was so hot it was like touching a stovetop. I'm like, ooh, like, oh my God, right? Like, no, I'm not getting out of this thing. If somebody's over there, this. And I was trying to call on the radio, and the radios didn't work. This is in the pre-800 megahertz radio days. You had to have line of sight and all this stuff. I'm like, calling our unit number, emergency traffic in Harbison Canyon, and all we're hearing is, that's all we're hearing on reply. And so I said, let's just keep going. We got to get to this kid. So we're driving down. It's getting worse and worse. And it's funny because you're thinking to yourself, even though it's getting worse and worse, you're thinking, I'm eventually going to punch through here, right? So I will punch through, and then it'll be okay. And that was not the case. So we just kept going down into this canyon, and it's just getting worse and worse. The flames are up on both sides, and it's on, I mean, like, literally the grass to the edge of the road was on fire. And we come around this bend, and we get to this point where the power lines are down, and they're across the street, like Spider-Man had shot a web up there, and the power lines are across the street. And we're sitting there for a second thinking, well, what the heck are we going to do now? And so we were kind of stuck there for a second, because it wasn't easy to just go turn around at this place, because there's like fire on both sides of you. And I remember we sat there for a second, and I leaned forward over the dashboard, and I looked up, and all I could see is flames and smoke everywhere. And I looked at my partner. I said, really calm, I was like, dude, I think we're gonna die. And he's like, yeah, I think you're right. I think we might die. And we kind of, like, it was this moment of realization. And I said, no, dude, like, let's turn around and see if we can get out of here. And so we had to do this. It felt like 10 or 12 point turn. You'd pull up a couple of feet, and then you back up a couple of feet, and you'd crank the wheel and turn up a feet. It was like Austin Powers when he was stuck in that hallway in the, like, golf cart thing. You just back and forth trying to turn around. We finally turned this thing around, and we're booking it, trying to get out of this fire because the fire is just raging. And we come around this bend, and up ahead of us is a downed tree that has since we passed by has fallen and is on fire in the road, across the road. No easy way around it. And so we had a brief conversation and we decided to jump the tree. So we aimed for the thinnest part of the tree, and which is like the top part where all the leaves are and stuff. And we hit this thing and went like airborne like this with this ambulance. Just destroy. I don't even, Joe McKay, if you're watching this, I don't know what that ambulance looked like when we brought it back to you eventually, but it was pretty jacked up when we were driving it. And we like went airborne and come down, and we're like, oh my God, we made it out of this thing, right? We drive out of Harvesting Canyon. We pass by this firefighter still firefighting. And we said, we're going to go up this other way because we're super dedicated to getting this kid, right? We're going to go save this kid who actually ended up being down closer to Crest, which is a long ways down. And we went back up and headed sort of south, and which you go to this like switchback road, this really sharp turn road that goes down into another canyon. We go onto the switchback, we look down the canyon, the whole place is on fire. And so my partner and I are like, dude, the whole place on fire. Let's just keep driving. We're going to go. We won't go as far this time, right? Not going to be stupid. Not going to go as far this time. We started driving down, and we're maybe like a minute down into this canyon. And all of a sudden I felt like, oh my God, something's very wrong with me. And I went, uh-oh. I said, something's wrong. And I threw up. And I went sort of unconscious. And I remember slumping into my seat and my partner going, whoa. And then I remember jostling, and I guess he was turning around. I woke up like on the freeway, on the 8 freeway. And I remember we were passing by one of those big green signs on the side of the freeway, and I could see our lights reflecting off that green sign. And I kind of went out again. And then the next thing I know, I'm like over this guy's back. He was a big country dude, you know, like, kind of like me, but he like put me over his back, and I was like, I opened my eyes and my hands were swinging because I was like leaning over this guy's back, and he was carrying me into Grossmont Hospital. So it turns out that I had carbon monoxide poisoning from being inside the fire. My partner had a really bad cold that day, and apparently that kept all the sooty whatever nonsense from getting down into his lungs. He was coughing up black stuff. But I ended up going to Grossmont Hospital with carbon monoxide poisoning. And I was waiting there for some time for the hyperbaric chamber, which they have there, which you can use to blow off all that carbon monoxide. And they called my girlfriend, my wife now, they called my girlfriend Amanda, and she had to drive all the way down to El Cajon to come get me at Grossmont. And she came in and she was none too pleased that the last phone call that she got was of going into the flames. And then the next phone call she got was from the hospital saying, your boyfriend's here and he's not in good shape. And so I was at the hospital for I don't know how long. I was really sick. I was on high flow oxygen and all this stuff. And then a doctor kind of came to me and said, hey, you know, I got some other patients that are more critical than you. You work on an ambulance, you know, take care of yourself. I'm just going to discharge you. You know, this is like, you know, battlefield style stuff. You know, at that time with the Cedar Fire, people were coming in with all kinds of injuries and burns and stuff like that. And I said, well, how long am I going to feel like this? And he goes, probably about 3 weeks. And sure enough, it was exactly 3 weeks that I felt really, really sick. The funny thing was I went the next day to work at the Senate because that's how I roll, right? And I was sitting at my desk at the Senate, and I was typing individual letters because I forgot how to type because my head wasn't working. And my district director's name, her name was Carol Marks, wonderful lady. Carol Marks had come in. She goes, what's going on? What's wrong with you? And I said, I have carbon monoxide poisoning. I was in the fire last night. And she's like, what the heck are you doing? I still smelled like fire. Still smelled heavily of fire. And so she sent me home, and I ended up being home for a couple weeks and stuff like that. But what was funny was that when I came back to work, I had to go to the Carlsbad Republican Women Federated event, the luncheon that was being held at the Olympic Resort in Carlsbad. And I was sitting there, and there was supposed to be, the speaker was supposed to be this fire chief talking about the Cedar Fire, and he got called away for something else. And so one of the ladies from the Carlsbad Republican Women Federated came up to me and she goes, "Hey, the fire chief isn't here. Do you think you could talk about, like, get up and give a speech?" And I said, "How well?" And I was scared of speaking at this point, right? I was still pretty scared of it. I said, "Well, how long is the speech?" And she goes, "Like 30 minutes." And I'm like, "Dude, 30 minutes? Like, how long do I have to prepare?" She goes, "Like 3 minutes. Just, it's fine. 3 minutes, you prepare, do 30 minutes. And I said, "Well, what was he going to talk about?" She goes, "The Cedar Fire. Do you know anything about the Cedar Fire?" And I said, "Yeah, I know something about the Cedar Fire." And so I got up, and then during the speech, I got to tell them the same story that I just told you guys, with the exact same kind of inflections and whatnot. And they were extremely interested in it. It was an interesting story. But and I've told the story many times in person before, but I've never really put it on video before. So 20 years ago yesterday, that happened. So we're sort of celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Cedar Fire by telling you the story. Thanks.